Hello and welcome back to the TorontoWebsiteDeveloper.com. I am Peter Jaworski, the Toronto Website Developer specializing in Drupal. And in this 7th video tutorial of this 10-part video tutorial series on views, we're going to move on from contextual filters and relationships and look at how to integrate a module with the Views API so that the data that your module provides is all available within a specific view. So in order to do that, first thing that I've done is I've gone ahead and created a new content type that's called dog picture review. And all it has is a rating. So it'll have a title and a rating for a dog picture. And I've done that using the 5-star module as well as the voting API. In the actual database, I've gone ahead and created a database table which contains the node ID of the image that we're reviewing, the node reference node ID. So this is a new node that actually contains our 5-star rating as well as the title, and then a user ID of who's created that review. Typically, this would be done all within your module. So if you use something like the node review module, this could be a similar setup. The reason why I've done it this way is just so that we have some data in the database that we need to integrate. Typically, your module will provide a whole bunch of functionality that you'll be pulling in. But just for the sake of this, just a quick and easy example, so I've gone ahead and added that. So since we've got this set up, we've got some data that we need to incorporate from the database. We need it to be associated with views. In order to do that, you have to have your module. And so in order to have a module, you have to have an info file and a module file. If you're not familiar with this, check out Drupal.org. There's lots of documentation on this. So just quickly, I'm going to create my info file. Just paste in some information here. You have your name, your description, your version of Drupal core, the package where my module is going to be listed in the modules listing page is going to be with views. And then I've got the dependency. I obviously have to have the views module. And then I'm going to define my files. So I've got my module file. And then you also see here, I've got commented out another file called twd views inc. And in Drupal 7, you have to define all your files in your info file. And views inc is no different. So I'm letting views know that I have that. And you'll see where this comes up in the moving on in the video tutorial. The other thing that I've gone ahead and done is I've gone to drupal.org/project/advanced help and I've downloaded that module. What this does is it provides some more in-depth help on module or for modules that actually link into them. So views is one of those modules. So when we go to the advanced help page, you'll see that views is listed here. And when you actually go to this page, you'll see that there's a whole plethora of information. So if my video tutorial series doesn't answer all your questions, maybe check out the advanced help because there's a lot of information here. But we're going to click on Views API, and first thing that Views API tells us that we have to do is we have to create hook views data in our .module file, and this will tell views about our integration, and you're going to actually return an array. And so what that array has to tell views is which version of the API that you're using, but then you can also provide a path and a template path. The path is where your .views.inc files are going to reside. So if you remember in my info file, I defined my twd views inc. This array will actually define where that path is, and so I'll give you an example of that. So I'm just going to paste back in my code here, and you'll see that I'm returning an array. And first key is my API. I'm using 3. Second is my path, and this is going to call Drupal get path, which is a function of Drupal core, and you pass in 2 parameters. So first one is that I'm looking for a module. This could have been a theme. And then I give the name of the actual module. And so my module is twd views. And so that will return my full path. And then I'm going to append an includes folder. And the reason why I do that is because if I look at my actual setup here, I've got my sites all modules, twd views. I've created an includes folder, and this has my twd views inc. This is something that's frequent in contributed modules. You'll often see an includes folder where there's integration with views that will contain additional files. The reason being you just don't want to clutter up your core folder there for your module. So gone ahead and done that. The other thing that you can add here is the template path. So if I was using templates, again, it would be another key that I would add to my array, and I would do something similar to Drupal get path, providing the module, provide in the name here, and then a reference to maybe /templates or something along those lines. But I'm not going to use the template file. There are definitely examples of that if you'd like to check them out. I think the user relationships module might actually have examples of that. So if you check that out, you might be able to see what I'm talking about. Now that we've gone ahead and done that, we have to create another file, and that file is going to be our twd views.views inc file. And what this does is it actually describes our tables to views. So we're going to move on to that section of the advanced help. So that's right here. Go ahead and click on that. And the first thing that this advanced help page is going to tell us about is the fact that we have to return an array keyed by our database tables. So before we actually do that, we're going to take hook views data. We're going to copy that. And in our page here, we're going to go function hook views data. We're going to have data is equal to an array. And we're going to return data, right? Just to make sure we always return it. And so get rid of via, and this is twd views. We replace hook with our module name, and now we're kind of ready to go. As I mentioned, data has to be keyed by your database table name. So ours is going to be keyed by twd reviews. So that will be the first key. But before we actually go ahead and do that, you'll see that you can create information about all of your tables. And typically there will be 3 keys for each database table, and that's going to be the group, the title, and the help. The group is going to be where your table information is actually listed when you go to create a new view. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, go to dog image here that we created. And when I click add field, if I go to filter, you'll see that I've got these different possibilities here. And I'm seeing twd dogs already because I walked through this video tutorial before, so I just have to clear my caches. So I'll do that now. Now, going back, we also have the title and the help. These typically are not used because they're just defaults for the fields that you're going to provide in. They typically will get overwritten, so you won't. It's not often that you'll see these actually in the definition of the table. So more often than not, what you'll see is this one-liner here, which is your data, and it just defines the group. And so we'll take that line and we'll paste that into our code here, and we'll replace foo with twd twd views. And that's actually wrong. Remember, we said it's got to be twd dog reviews. Twd dog reviews. So it'd probably be better if I had synced up my module name and my table name, but that's beyond this. So we're just going to go twd dogs. Right, save that part. So now we've got our group defined, and the next step here is to determine whether or not your table, so whether or not your module is going to provide a base table to views, or whether or not it's going to hook into a base table. And the difference between these are what views is going to actually use as its first table to pull information out of. So if you remember earlier in the video tutorial series, we started talking about base tables, and you can use comments as your base table, you could use users as your base tables, and for our examples, we've been using nodes as our base table. And what that means is all of the information that we're pulling out is actually based on the node information that we're going to be returning. So remember when we first tried to put down a user information, or put down some user information, all we could pull in was the UID, because that's all that's associated in the node table. It was only once we created a relationship to the user table that we could pull in additional information. And that's because nodes are a base table. For this example, I'm not going to use a base table because, as my example demonstrates, there's really no information here that would suffice to be a base table in and of itself. However, if you wanted to include your database table as a base table, you can simply pull in this snippet here. And the one thing that you have to know, and so when I say snippet here, I mean this in the code box, is that you have to define a primary key field. And so that's this field is equal to NID. This example obviously coming from the node table. But the reason you do that is that's what other tables are going to hook into. So you've got to define what your primary key is. So you've got to define that, and then obviously you should put in a title, some help, and the weight in terms of where things are going to line up when you're first going to select your base table. The other neat thing is you can define a database key if you want to connect to an external database, so one that's outside of your actual Drupal installation. And again, you've got some information there on how to do that, so that's kind of neat. Second thing that I'm going to mention, kind of walk you through, but we're not actually going to do, is whether or not you wanted to join your table through another table. An example of that would be kind of our term data connecting to term node. Term data doesn't actually contain an NID, so it can't connect directly to the node table, which would be the base table. So what it does is it makes a connection through the term node, which has NID, version ID, and then TID, right, the taxonomy ID. And so because term data and term node share taxonomy ID, it can hook into term node, and term node then connects into node based on the node ID. I know that's a bit confusing, but again, it's just an opportunity for you to use another table, leverage in if you want to connect to the node table and you don't necessarily have node information. And the way that you do that, again, another code snippet that's provided here in the advanced help, you can go ahead and copy this, but what you do is this would be your table name, the first taxonomy term data that's there, and you're going to be doing table join, and you're going to join the node. What's the difference between this and just doing a regular join between your table and the node table is you're going to include a left table, and that value will be the table that you're connecting in through. So you'll see that they're connecting in through term node, so left table is the term node value that's provided there. For our sake, what we're going to do is a similar join, so I can go ahead and grab this data, and all I've got to do is define the two fields that we're going to join on. So the next line here is going to be my data, and rather than term node, this is going to be twd dog reviews table join node. My left field, so the first field that I'm going to be pulling from to make sure that there's information for, is going to be in the node table. And you'll see here, node ID is the primary ID, so that's good. And in our code, the field from my table, the TW dog review, is going to be node ID as well. And just to confirm, we can go back to, trying to find it now, TWD dog reviews. And NID is my primary field as well. So that's why they're connected there. That's how we're going to loop them in together. So that's how the first connection is going to occur. The other thing we can do is we can always define relationships for the other fields, and we're going to do that as well. I'm going to walk you through that. So of note here, first thing, you can define your own custom handler. We're going to talk about what handlers are, but just know that this defaults to views join. More often than not, you won't need to change this, but it is possible. So just in case you're aware and you're looking for more of the technical aspects of joins, you might want to define your own handler. Second thing, table, you don't usually have to use this. This is just if you've used an alias for your table, you want to define what this is actually, the actual name. Field, remember, this is required. The left field, this is required. Left table, something we talked about, only if you're joining through another table. And lastly, the thing that I'll kind of walk you through is the type. So we're using left joins, that's what views defaults to, but it is possible to use an inner join. And you would simply do that by going ahead and going type, and this would just be inner, right, rather than the left. So pretty simple. We'll get rid of that because we're not going to do that. These extra fields, I've never used them. I don't know that you would either. You have to have something pretty advanced, I would say, to use that or require that. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Now, we've defined our table. We've identified it, linking to the node table. We've gone ahead and done that, but we haven't actually added any information. And so we'll go ahead and we'll do that. And views typically has 5 different types of items that can be defined. So you can define an argument, a field, a filter, relationship, or a sort. And this should all be pretty intuitive because when you look at the views here, you'll see that we've got fields, filters, sort, contextual filters, and relationships. So if we're ever trying to leverage those, we've got to define them for views. So it makes some sense there. Before we actually do that, there's a few things that you can define for every field, which is a good idea. And those are the group, the title, and the help. Right? And so that's kind of what you're going to group where your fields are going to be grouped by. So ours by default are going to be TWD dogs because that's what we created. But then we can provide titles and we can provide help for each field. I should mention that fields typically correspond to actual your database fields, but they don't have to. You can have your own custom fields. So the node edit link is an example of that. And you'll see when we walk down into the actual help here, it shows the how the node edit link is actually created. It's not a field in the database, but what it does is it invokes this custom handler. And the handler is actually code and kind of returns a value back to views. And so that value happens to be a node edit link, and that's provided by the node module. So that's pretty neat. So it is possible to do that. So don't think that you're restricted to just what's in your database. You could do some neat things. The other thing that I should mention is you don't have to use the specific field name itself. You can use aliased fields. with the field alias. So you'll see here an example of that where they've got the user ID current, which again isn't in the database, but this is actually the real field is the user ID. So I'm not going to use any aliases, but it's possible to do that. So just be aware of that. Now, if we move down, you'll see all of the things that we can define here. So remember, we talked about group title help, real field, and then you've got the 5 kind of values. So we've got the field, the filter, sort, relationship, argument. So what we'll do is we're going to actually go ahead and steal some code. And that code is just up here. So we'll go ahead and grab this. And this has an example of everything except for relationship. So we'll add relationship ourselves. But just bear with me. I'm going to paste this in, clean it up, and then resume the video tutorial. So I'm going to pause it right now. Great. So with that, I've pasted in the information and I've kind of cleaned it up. So we'll walk through it together. So first thing I've got to do, I've got data node NID here. Obviously, it shouldn't be node. It should be twd dog reviews, right? Because that's our table. And we're defining first field is going to be our NID field. So we can keep this title as NID, and we can do the node ID of the reviewed node. We know that that's what this is, right? And this help will appear in the UI. So that's a small comment to help us out there. Now we're going to actually define a field for this, right? Because we want this to be able to be chosen when we go to add fields. For the sake of this example, I'm going to include that, but in reality, we really don't need to do that because all that we have is NID for the actual node that was reviewed, the NID of the review, and then we've got the user ID. Those are all 3 fields that already exist in the database, so we really don't need to define new fields. We can just use these through relationships. But again, I want to walk you through everything here. So first thing that we're going to do is define the handler, and we're going to actually use the views handler field node, and that's provided by the node module. So what I'll actually do here is walk you over to api.drupal.org. And if you do a quick search for views, you're going to find this page. And you can go to other projects. And the nice thing here is you can go to views and you can look at views handlers. This will give you some information on what views handlers are, but we can also scroll down and you'll see we've got views field handlers. And so first thing I'm going to show you is this is the default views field or views handler field. So this is the default handler. You know, if we weren't using any other handler, we would use this one. It just provides unformatted field. But when we click on it, one thing that it shows us is that we can define click sortable, right? So in our actual code here, you see we're using views handler field node, and then we're using click sortable is equal to true. And then when we just go back a page, we can search node. And if we come up on it, we can see views handler field node, and it's provided by the node module in their inks field, right? Or an ink file, and you can get a little description of what it does there. So that's fields. Next thing we're going to look at is arguments, right? So we're going to define an argument, and same idea. We're going to go back, look at the argument handlers, and if we look at the default views handler argument, so this is kind of the base class for the arguments. If we click on it, you'll see that there are a number of things that we can define here. So we can define the name field, the name title, empty field name, and the validate type, right? And so you'll see that node takes advantage of all of that. So we're going to use the argument node NID because we're also using NID, so that just makes sense. The name field, the title, right? And then we've got a numeric value because NID is going to obviously be numeric, and the validate type is NID. You don't actually have to include validate type. According to the api.drupal.org, it says, probably not be used at all, may disappear, but obviously node module is using it, so we'll just leave it in. Filter is pretty straightforward. Views handler, filter numeric. When we go back and we look at views handler filter, we can see if we do a quick search, numeric, there's a numeric one, right? And all this does is provide a handler for numbers, right? And so you'll see different, when you're creating different filters and that kind of thing, you'll see how things are treated differently. Taxonomy terms are treated differently, strings are treated differently, and numbers are treated differently. And the reason for that is they're all using different handlers. And so we'll keep it with the numeric handler. We're good with that, so that's fine. And then the sort, we're just going to use the default handler sort, and that's what node NID is using. You might be asking yourself, how do you know which handler to use? To be honest, look through the list. This list is a little bit daunting because it includes all core modules that are calling views as well. But if you actually go to the file structure and you go to sites all modules, you go into views, handlers, you can see the list of the specific handlers that they have. And a lot of them are named pretty intuitively, right? So if you're using markup, you're looking at a date, you're looking at custom field, right? You can use all of these filters and choose the appropriate one based on your scenario. So there's no kind of hard and fast rule on what you should be doing. Now, the obvious thing that we don't have here is a relationship, so we're going to go ahead and add that. And so, in order to do that, I'm going to create relationship. Obviously going to be equal to an array, like everything else. And when we go to advanced help, it's actually not included on this describing your table page. What we'll do is we'll actually go up, and then if we scroll down a bit and we look at integrating the node example module, let's click on that. And if we scroll down, you'll see that there's actual implementation information on creating a relationship. And there's some dedicated discussion about that. So what I'm going to do here is I see the relationship key, so I'll just go ahead and grab this information. I think I went one line too far, but that's okay. And again, so one line too far. So we've got our label, we've got our base field, and we don't need to use base field, or rather, sorry, skip base. That's because we don't actually have a base table, so we can go ahead and take that out. So now we've got this. Label is obviously not going to be, or sorry, is going to be node, but the base is going to be, yeah, so it'll be node, base field is NID, so that's good. So we're good on that front, right? So we can leave that relationship intact there. Now, if we go ahead and we save this, actually, before we save it, what we'll do is we'll add our other fields as well. So I'll pause this video tutorial, add the other fields, we'll walk through them, and then we can go ahead and check out actual views. Okay, great. I've gone ahead, I've added the information, and what I did is added NR NID and NR UID. I didn't actually finish up the UID because I wanted to walk you through it, but to do NRID, I just had to update the description, and then it was all pretty much the same information because I'm still using an NID. But for user ID, I changed the actual field name, and then I changed the title to UID, the user ID of the reviewer. But then here, for my field, I'm not using a views handler field node. I should be using something for a user. So if I go back to my browser and I step back and I look at views field handlers, just search for user. And if I walk through things, I'll see here I've got views handler field user to provide a simple render that allows linking to a user. So that sounds like something I want. So I can go ahead and save this, or rather copy it. And then here, for my handler for the field, I can go ahead and paste that. So that's field user now. And then in terms of my argument, again, I shouldn't be using an argument for an NID. So let's go back and find a appropriate handler. So we'll look at argument, and we'll try to find user. And we'll see here we've got views handler argument user ID. So that sounds appropriate. Accepts argument handler to accept a user ID. Sounds exactly what we need. So let's go ahead and change this. Add that. And if you remember, we didn't need validate type, so we can go ahead and just take that out. And then it's still numeric, so that's fine. We still want the basic sort, so that's not a problem. And then our relationship. It's actually not going to be no, it's going to be user. And the base is going to actually be the users table. Remember the S. And the base field is actually going to be UID. So now we can go ahead and save that. And we've gone ahead and we've created all of our fields. So we can step back into our site and we should be able to find all of this and actually create a view. So let's do that. So first thing we're going to need to do is actually flush all of our caches because we just made a bunch of changes to views. And we're going to let views know about them. So with our caches cleared, we can go to add a new view. And as I mentioned, what we'd like to do is actually create a block that will show up on underneath our images and show our actual views that we've actually had created. So we can go ahead and create a block. We're going to call this TWD reviews, and we're going to do one of fields. Unformatted is fine, and we'll go continue and edit. And so we've got our titles here, we've got published, we've got post date. We can add a filter here, and we see we've got TWD dogs. And so we can obviously add the NID, we can add the NID of the reviewed node or the user ID. So what we were looking for was maybe content. So what we want to do is add a node type. We can go ahead and apply there because we only want to see reviews. Dog picture reviews. We can go ahead and hit apply. Now if we scroll down, we see we've got a bunch of these names for our actual reviews, but we don't actually have the value. So let's go ahead and add a field. And this will come from our content. And this will actually be vote. What did I call it? So our rating, let's go ahead and apply that. And so this is going to be as stars. Yep, we're going to expose this. We don't want it to be able to vote. We want the user's vote, and we want the user vote. Let's go ahead and apply that. So that actually, adding that field had nothing to do with our module or our work. That was just to get the value out of the content type that I created from 5-star. And so now you'll see here I've got a bunch of reviews with some ratings. But problem is I'm getting these all. I'm not getting them for a specific node. So I should have to provide a node ID and then get those reviews back, right? Because I just want to see the reviews for a specific image that I'm looking at. So in order to do that, we can go ahead to our Advanced tab, and we learned about contextual filters previously. Let's go ahead and add one. And we'll go to TWD dogs, and we're going to do it for the node ID of the reviewed node, right? Because that's all we want to see is reviews for a reviewed node. So we can go ahead and apply that. And we're going to provide a default if it's not provided, and that default is going to be the content ID from the URL. And so we can apply that as well. Now when we go down here, we should get nothing. That's right. So if we add in node 15, which I happen to know is a node image, we can scroll down and we're getting a dog review. So that's great. So now the next thing that we need to do is actually pull in some additional information. We need the actual review, and we're not getting that because we haven't created a relationship. We haven't told views which information to pull in. So let's go ahead and add a relationship. And again, TWD dogs. And we're going to go of the review node. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And I wonder if I screwed that up originally, but let's just confirm. So this is review node. And this is going to be required. Got to have this. So we go ahead and hit apply. No point showing a node that doesn't actually relate. Let's just see what we did here. Of the reviewed node. Okay, good. So we're good. Okay, and so for content rating, this should actually use the relationship. We'll apply that. Title should actually use the relationship, so we'll apply that. And the reason why we did that was because originally this was the content title and the content rating for the node in the base table. The base table is the actual dog image that we're looking at. We want to get information for the reviewed node, so that's why we created this relationship here. So again, now if we go ahead and we update the preview, we're not getting information, which kind of doesn't help us in this situation. Just briefly take a look at what's going on here. And so pretty dumb mistake here. Content type is equal to dog picture review. This should obviously be the related node we're talking about, so we should use that relationship. We can go ahead and apply that. Now when we go down here and we update our preview, we can scroll down and we'll see we're getting all the reviews for node ID and ID 15. So that's good. That's great. Other thing that we want to do though is pull in the actual user's name. So of the reviewer. So we can go back to our relationships. We're going to go to TWD dogs. We're going to add a user ID. And this is relating to our actual table, so we don't have to worry about using a relationship on this one, but we are going to require it. And so what we'll do is go to add, filter, users, and let's just add in the username. We can apply that. We're going to use the relationship user. That's fine. We're going to link it. We'll hit apply. Last thing we want to do is change the display name. This can be dog reviews. Hit apply. Let's go ahead and save this. Now we go to structure, blocks, And we're going to scroll all the way down. We're going to put our block into the content. And we'll just scroll up and we'll see it's underneath the main content, so that's great. We can go ahead and save this block. And if we go ahead and we navigate to an image, we got node 17. If we scroll down, here's our review for node 17. And if we go to node 15, and scroll all the way to the bottom, we've got all of our reviews for node 15. So there we go. We just linked up our custom module into views, pulled in this information. Again, took another look at arguments and relationships. We're clean. And if we go to, say, another page, because we're using an argument pulling in an NID, we don't actually have the block showing up. So that's great. So that's it. That's this look at Views API. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, please post them. And as always appreciate comments. Let me know how this is helping you out. And if you want to throw me a thumbs up, always appreciate those. So until next time, we'll see you then.